All right, here's my plan. Let's see if I can do it.
My children to read that.
My plan is to kind of finish up our discussion on ways to think about heaven and hell, and how we think about that. Going to look at a couple more passages, and then we'll have looked at all the ones where Jesus uses the word that we translate hell, and then hopefully we can talk about maybe what is the best way or some helpful ways to think about it. So we've got really two more passages left. Matthew 18, verse 9. Matthew 18, verse 9 is where the word is used. But I want you to see the context, because again, it's important for us to see how exactly is this word used. Jesus is the one who uses it. He's the one who talks about Gehenna. There's only James is the only other one who ever uses the word. So if Jesus is the one who's using it, what is he saying? What's he talking about? If we start in Matthew 18, verse 5, he's talking about whoever receives one child in my name receives me. This is about humbling yourself as a child in verse 4. That makes you great in the kingdom of heaven. He talks about receiving the child. Then he says in verse 6, but whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble. The first thing he says, it's better for him to have a heavy millstone hung around his neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. Once again, I would say he's talking figuratively. He's not a call to action. If someone hurts a child, go drown them. No, it's not, violence is not the answer. But his point being, this is so serious, it's like that's what should happen to you. It's to get people to realize causing a little one to stumble is serious, grievous thing. That's what he's saying. He's not being literal. Then he says, he starts in verse 7, woe to the world because of its stumbling blocks, for it is inevitable that stumbling blocks come, but woe to that man through whom the stumbling block comes. I mean, if you're causing other people to stumble, that's a problem. Well, when he gets down to, it's 8 and 9, although he only uses Gehenna in 9, but they're parallel. And it's very much like what is recorded in the Sermon on the Mount. Verse 8, if your hand or foot causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it from you, for it is better for you to enter life crippled or lame than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be cast into the eternal fire. If your eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out and throw it from you. It is better for you to enter life with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be cast into the fiery hell. And there's the use of Gehenna, right? So it's similar to the discussion we had, the way he's using it in Sermon on the Mount. But the context, of course, is accept children, don't cause them to stumble, and if you're causing others to stumble, this is a serious problem, and so he uses this dramatic language, cut, again, not literal, but it'd be better to lop off parts of your body that are offending so as to not offend, right? That's his point. Okay, one more passage, Matthew 23 and verse 15. For one more context, because we're going to look at 2 verses. 15. This is a different use. Very different. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you travel around on sea and land to make one proselyte, one convert, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as much the son of hell as yourselves. Now that's an interesting use of Gehenna. You guys are sons of Gehenna, and you're making other people do sons of Gehenna. So, in his, whatever Jesus means by this term, it can be your parent. It can be your parent. Right? It can parent you. So that's the analogy. You're a child of this, right? It has somehow parented you. It's a little bit like James uses it, that our tongues can be set on fire by the fires of hell. It can be the origin of behavior here and now, right? James is using it that way. The one time outside of Jesus that someone uses Gehenna. James uses it as it is something which can set your tongue on fire now, right? This life. It's this life oriented. And here Jesus is saying, you Pharisees are sons of Gehenna. And you're making converts, and you're just making them like yourself, right? Then the last time is in verse. No, that was the last time. Why did I have that verse down here? Oh no, the last one is 33. He's still talking to these leaders. He says, "You serpents, you brood of vipers, how will you escape from the sentence of hell?" Okay, the judgment of hell, right? So now we've looked at all the instances the word Gehenna is used by Jesus, and he's the one who uses it by far the most times. And like we said, he uses it a total of 7 times. It's not a lot. Okay. Now to be transparent, because I want to share with you my thoughts about how I think about it. But to be transparent, we've looked at all the instances of the word Gehenna, which is the word translated hell. There are 11 instances of the word Hades, which refers to the realm of the dead, where all the dead go. That's found in Scripture. And then there's lots of other references that people say, oh yeah, that's talking about hell. And I'm a little dubious. I mean, just because someone will say, well, Jesus tells a parable and says, well, they're cast into the darkness. And they say, well, that darkness is hell. Well, how do you know? Right? How did we decide that every reference to, like, darkness, or any time when it says there's weeping and gnashing, or all these other metaphorical terminology, that they're all referring to what Jesus was talking about with Gehenna, right? And I know kind of in a lot of classical kind of interpretation, that is all those are put together. But I don't think you get there from exegesis. I think you get there because you've got that idea in your head, and then every time something dire seems to be said, you must be talking about that, right? Because you've already decided that. And so, for myself, I'm just a little suspicious. Like, I don't know. What was Jesus talking about? What are some of these other instances? Things like that. It was interesting today, we read from Matthew where Jesus is going to baptize people in fire. Well, people don't say, well, that must be hell. No, they go, well, no, that's not hell. You know? Why not? Well, he says he'll burn up the chaff with fire. Well, that fire in Matthew 3 that we read this morning is hell, but the fire of the baptism is not hell. There was a time where I read through all these because I was trying to figure this out for myself, the way I've been taught, and I really came to realize, I think it's a bit tenuous to take all these bits and pieces and say they're all referring to the same thing when the text doesn't seem to say that. And then to think maybe there's other possibilities of what's being said, right? But I know a great case can be made that says it's eternal conscious torment, that and every reference, no matter how oblique, is all talking about that. And so quote unquote Gehenna is all in Scripture, even though Paul never uses the term, John never uses the term, you know. He wrote Revelation, he never used the term. So I'm a little dubious. That's just personally. But like I said, the ecumenical church councils have not made a decision on this matter. So we're not even under kind of ecclesiastical authority to take a certain position. And this is certainly one of the areas with which you do not have to agree with me. As with everything else, you don't have to agree with me.
Greg, also, do you feel like if we do lump them together, is it even a coherent picture of what that would be?
I don't think so.
I feel like, yeah, it's,
I don't think so, because there's like an interesting parable in Matthew where they're thrown into the furnace, and it says, and then they shall shine like the sun. And, well, maybe we don't need to go there because I'll start going to other passages. But I start thinking,
he'd almost have to disagree with himself in places, right?
yeah, I'm willing to say this is really rather complex, and I'm not always sure from passage to passage what Jesus is talking about, or what someone else is talking about, or, you know, what is the furnace in one passage? Is that to be equated with hell, or is that something else? In Malachi, the furnace is what refines the Israelites. It's explicitly stated. It refines them. He's coming as a refiner's fire, a smelter of gold and silver, and he throws them in the furnace to bring them out purified. So when Jesus uses a parable and says, well, they'll be thrown into the furnace, and someone says, well, that's hell, I'm like, maybe that's the classic idea of hell, but maybe it's Malachi's furnace, which he would have known, and it's in a, you know, and Malachi is the one who's predicting the coming of John the Baptist and the Messiah, and that this is what he's going to do. So that's why I would say, yeah, it's not, to me, simple.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, and that would be part of the question, would be what does Jesus mean by Gehenna, and then what is the purpose of other instances where he says, like, cast into outer darkness. I was listening to Father John Baer, and he was really good. His point was, we were reading a parable, and they were cast into outer darkness. And Father John Baer, who's Orthodox, said, well, what do you do when you're in the outer darkness? You look for the light. His reading was, they were cast into outer darkness not to leave them there, but to make them go, oh, maybe we need to look for light. That's the way he was interpreting the parable that I was taught, was when they're cast into outer darkness, that's how they will forever be. God wills them to be in the darkness forever, rather than that is a curative function, right? It's to cure them of their illness, right? So if I can't see the light, put me in the darkness, then I might start looking for it, right? I might have a change of heart. I might actually repent and go, okay, I'm ready for light, right? So there's a lot of questions to be asked, right? So let me give you some of my thoughts, then maybe for whatever they're worth. So in general, heaven and hell. Heaven and hell, I see them both as states of being, not literal places, right? There's not a place with a geographical location, but they're states of being. They're conditions in which I can find myself. And the description of heaven, with all of its allusions to kind of the palace of God, the presence of God, being in the Psalm 23, in the house of the Lord forever. I mean, those kinds of pictures are saying not about a place, but about a state of being. Like, I can be, like Psalm 23, in the house of the Lord forever, right? And a forever that starts now. I don't have to wait till I die and I'll finally be in the house of the Lord. No, I can be in the house of the Lord forever. Nothing in Psalm 23 indicates that he dies in that process. He walks through the valley of the shadow of death. So I would say for both, it's more helpful, at least the way I want to think about it, that seems helpful to me, is think about them as states of being. And states of being that are both true now and will be true in the age to come. So I can be in the presence of God. I can be experiencing the heavenly realities now, which I would say is very similar to what Jesus means by living in the kingdom. And he's all the time inviting people to come into the kingdom, to enter the kingdom, to receive the kingdom, to trust the kingdom. And it says, if you do this, you're living in the kingdom. He's, to me, saying, this is how you can experience the presence of God, i.e. heaven now. Not in its completeness and fullness, because we're still beset with troubles and sickness and disappointments and sufferings, but it's not something that is just simply in the by and by after I die. So I tend to think about it as heaven both now and hell as now. And I think that actually, to me, is more relevant than thinking about the hereafter. Because the thing that matters to me existentially today and tomorrow morning is a heaven and hell possibility right now. That's what's meaningful. Everything else is theoretical and it's off in the distance. Well, someday that tends to get closer, at least in certain ways. Of course, you never know. It could be closer than you think, right? If it's only about what happens after you die. So I tend to think about it as a state of being, either heaven or hell. Like I said last week, I can set my life on fire. Not hard to do. I know exactly how to do it. You just walk over to Regent Bank and try and hold it up. They'll catch me. My life will be on fire. Jesus will say, "Well, you threw yourself into Gehenna, didn't you?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, I sure did."
Yeah.
Yeah. I sure did. Set it on fire with gasoline. Now I'm miserable. I'm tormented in my flames that I kindle, right? So that's how I tend to think about it. And I read Jesus' use of it. It seems like when Jesus is using it, he's talking about here and now. He doesn't ever seem to be talking about the hereafter. He seems to be talking urgently to the people he's teaching. Like with the children. You don't want to cause one of these ones to stumble. It's not because someday you might get thrown into Gehenna. It's like it's an immediate concern that you not do this. Just like in the Sermon on the Mount. It's better to cut off your hand and toss it in Gehenna than your whole body go there, right? So if I think about it as a state of being that is possible now either way, then I can read Jesus that way, and he seems to be urgently telling me as a follower of his, don't be an idiot, Greg. Right? Don't do something ridiculous, because he's saying it to people who are his disciples, right? Except for the one passage we saw this morning where he tells the Pharisees they're children of hell, right? It's something he's saying to those who are seeking to follow him. So it's a warning against, as I would say, setting your life on fire, wandering off the path, doing something ridiculous, doing something you know to be wrong. Why would you do that? Right? So I read it that way.
Greg?
Yes.
Sorry, you're
No,
probably going to get
that's
this.
point one. Go ahead.
There seem to be some other passages that I have heard, or at least I thought that they were about hell at some point.
Right.
Or statements from Jesus that could be read as more of prophecies of end times with respect to the state of Israel or Judea and the,
Like destruction and
coming
stuff.
destruction
Yeah.
of the temple and Jerusalem.
Right.
Conquest by the Romans and the diaspora, and that sort of catastrophic societal catastrophe that I don't know if you would include those in this category of possibly hellish statements of his. They seem to be different.
Well, yeah, they're similar in the sense that they're warnings, which I would say hell is a warning to disciples. Not a threat, but a warning, because I really think I'm the one who sets the fires. That's how I tend to look at it, as what Jesus is telling me is like, Jesus is not saying, the only fires that Jesus sets in my life are the ones that purify me. The ones that torment me without any real purpose are the ones I kindle, right? Right? So like Matthew 3, to me, the baptism of fire is something that will help me, save me, cleanse me, purify me. But there are metaphorical fires that have no real cleansing function. They just make you miserable. Those are mine, right? Those are the ones I think I start. I could read those warning passages of destruction and stuff in the same way to be warned, even though I might think historically it had to do with a specific situation confronting the disciples, maybe in the time when closer to the time when Matthew's writing his gospel than when Jesus said it. Is that what you're asking? Like, I would say they have some of the same function, like a warning, don't be foolish.
Yeah, well, I guess I lump apocalyptic language together in my own head sometimes when I read it. I think
Right.
it's another, to me, it gets mixed together with the weeping and gnashing of teeth passages. It's a description of what awaits you in the fallen state of the world and the whole paradigm I was taught.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's true. I think that's a good way to think about it. Yeah. Huh?
Yeah, we're kind of, was just having a conversation in the other room and tying into what Derek's thinking. And certainly in evolution of my thought, primarily led by you. Life is a journey, and there's valleys and mountaintops. And we talked about it. The only time we learn anything is in the valleys.
Mhm.
And so those are hells. I mean, if you want to say they're down, type periods. And so I would think Jesus would warn you that, hey, there's a hell coming. The temple's going to be destroyed, all those kind of things. And in your life, if you go down that, you're going to set your life on fire, down that path. And I think it is how we view it ourselves. And I was talking with Keith and Sandra, and we were just talking about how we're doing. We're all saying, well, we're doing well, and talking about some other folks that weren't doing well, and then some of it was their mindset. And, you, in depression, what Keith said was, he goes, isn't it kind of like hell, when people are in depression? And it was like, yeah. It is.
Yeah.
And so, are you seeking the light, or are you seeking darkness, and are you spiraling into darkness? And whether it's heart surgery, cancer, or, hard things in life, losing your job, whatever, you can either spiral on it, or you can start walking towards the light and trying to be, positive about it. And I guess that's, it's a choice. It's your choice. God gave us free will. It's your choice. Do you want to walk towards darkness, or do you want to walk towards the light? And I think that's what Jesus' point there. If you're going to help your kids spiral into darkness, shame on you.
Right.
That's not good.
Yeah.
So anyway,
No, I
have to say about that.
Yeah, we said, last week we said anyone in addiction will identify their addiction as hell, without a doubt. They're not fearing some future thing. They're fearing a very present reality because they've been there, and if they got some sobriety, the last thing they want to do is go back to where they were before, right? So I think you're right. I think a good way of talking about hell is the very real, miserable circumstances that we can experience. Sometimes we create them ourselves, but sometimes maybe they happen to us. But it is a hellish experience. We're miserable. And the way I see God is He's in the business of rescuing us from that. I see Him not as the one who throws me into it. He's the one who gets me out of it. He's the one that I need to turn to when I'm in the darkness and look for the light. He's the one I need to turn to when I'm miserable. So when I'm reading it metaphorically for myself, I see it as a warning, don't be stupid, but I also see God's the one who's trying to get me out of the hells I get into through whatever way I end up in a miserable situation. And one of my other points is, in this life, it's not really an either or. We're talking about two things, but the reality of our experiences is some of both. None of us experience in life heavenly bliss, we wish, right? Untainted. So all of us experience a little bit of the hellish in our lives and hopefully some of the heavenly. And what we're trying to do as disciples is, as followers of Jesus, is to listen to Him more carefully about how to avoid the hellish experiences in as much as possible. There's some that, just the suffering, the pain of the world versus the suffering of when I'm not in control, making that distinction. So He's trying to help me to avoid it in this life and experience more of the heavenly, right? Experience more of the presence of God. So it's not a either or, it's a both and. And we're trying to move obviously toward the light, towards goodness, towards inner peace and peace with others, away from the hell of bitterness and estrangement and anger and all that, because that's hell, right? When you're on the outs with people, I mean, grievously so, that's hellish, right? So that's a second thing I want to, at least the way I think about it. It's not an either or. It's a both and in this life. And maybe the third one, and then you can comment and give other thoughts that you might have as well. I can't create heaven for myself on earth, but I can create hell. Heaven is a gift, right? And I'm using heaven as the metaphor of all good things coming down from the Father of lights, and metaphorically say, living with the presence of God, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control, all the virtues of the fruit of the Spirit, all those things. I can't make those. God gifts them to me. But what I can do without any help from God is set my life on fire. I don't need any help to do that. I'm fully capable. So this is the human dilemma. I'm only capable of evil. I'm not capable of good. Not ultimate, true good. Not the good of God. I need grace. I need God's assistance. I need the Spirit, right? So what I'm trying to do is not set my life on fire and trying to learn to depend and live into all the gifts that God is giving. So if there's any goodness, of course I give praise to God because God gets all the credit. I didn't do it. He gifted it. He made it. And so Jesus uses the language of the kingdom. He invites people to enter it and to receive it. Look carefully. We have a song, Build the Kingdom. It's not theologically correct. Nowhere are we told as Christians to go build the kingdom of God. I think Jesus already did that. The Father's doing that. That's the work of God. We're not called to build the kingdom. We're called to enter it, to receive it. Not to expand it. No, He's expanded it quite well. It covers the whole earth, right? I am invited to come into it. So it's that acknowledgement. But we as Americans, we like to think we're building things and making things. But sometimes we're not. That's the work of God. So that would be the other thing my third point of probably many I could make, but I'm not going to make more than that. But so those 3 points, right? I think about it as a state of being that is true about now and will extend through all eternity. But I think more about it for the here and now and don't worry about the future. Because, as I said before, the future takes care of itself. If I take care of the present, the future will take care of itself, right? So what I need to do is what Jesus says is each day has enough trouble of its own. I just need to worry today, as it were, about today's troubles. And am I embracing the hellish or am I embracing the heavenly? That's all I have to worry about. I don't have to think about, well, what will happen when I die? That'll work out if I take it one day at a time. Just like Jesus teaches us to do, is take it one day at a time, handle that day's evil, right? The trouble it brings, and I don't have to worry about it. So I think about it as a state of being. It's not an either or, it's a both and the only part that I can create is the hell. I can receive the heavenly. Okay, those are my 3 broad points of how I tend to think about heaven and hell, right? I'm no longer, as I was as a child, afraid of being sentenced there, though I had tried so hard to do everything right and find out the last day, Grace, you made a mistake, you didn't even know it, but it's sufficient. That finite mistake will bring infinite suffering. That's what I was taught. Finite mistakes bring infinite consequences. And then we said, but God is just. Wait a minute. Finite mistakes bring infinite consequences? A mistake I might have made in a 2-minute span requires all eternity to suffer for that? You know, to me, the logic breaks down for me. This is just me. For understanding a God who is eternally merciful and loving and wants to welcome me back as the prodigal.
And he made us,
I-
as we are.
Yeah, and I no longer worry about showing up at the last day and getting judged and finding out, despite all my best efforts, I'm doomed. Totally without me knowing. But that's what I used to be afraid of, right? I'm not at all afraid of that. I'm afraid of me setting my life on fire. And I'm trying not to do that. That's the only thing I don't fear my God anymore. He is not going to make me miserable.
So hell is your choice.
Yes, hell is my
Yeah.
creating. That's how I think.
Eternal or,
Yeah, it's what I create for myself, right? And so I need to start, realizing you're an idiot. You're making yourself miserable. Jesus is telling you how to live a different way, not to be miserable. All right, those are my thoughts.
So when I was 13, it was 1961, and we had the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Hmm?
And I was living in Florida, and I'm sure I've told this story before, because it's one of my main stories. But, I was living in Florida, my dad was building bomb shelters, and I couldn't sleep at night. And I went in and told my mother. She said, "What's wrong with you?" She said, "You're nervous all the time, you're not sleeping, you're not eating, what's wrong with you?" And I said, "I'm just worried sick about these, we're going to get bombed by the Russians." My mother said, "I just got my new Bible today." And she said, "It's a Phillips translation." And she said, in it, it says, "One day's trouble is enough for one day." Can you remember that? You know what? That was 65 years later, I'm still remembering that. And I appreciate that so much, because and being a person who's an excessive planner, that's difficult. I have to remember that every day, because I still start worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow. But that's a big billboard in my life, is one day's trouble is enough for one day.
Yeah.
Got a question?
So it seems like you're drawing some distinction between suffering and hell. I'm not sure how to actually draw that line. What's the difference between?
Who am I going to quote? Richard Rohr talks about necessary suffering, unnecessary suffering. He would say necessary suffering is just the things of life, like you get sick, that's a necessary suffering. He says when we resist necessary suffering, that's when we have unnecessary suffering. When I fight against life on just the way it is, I just wish I would never get sick. Now I'm suffering, and he would identify that suffering as when I'm not in control. Because why I'm suffering then is I wish I was in control, but I'm just a finite, fragile, vulnerable human being, and I'm not God. But I'm suffering because I'm resenting that I'm not able to make everything the way I want it. So he would identify the necessary suffering is life is going to serve you up some difficulties. If you fight that and just don't accept it, you will be worse off. You'll be suffering the unnecessary way in your own mind. Another way I've heard some people distinguish it is the difference between pain and suffering. They would say pain is unavoidable in life. You stub your toe, you got pain. You break an arm, you got pain. That would be just life. Suffering, again, they would distinguish. It's not pain like that. It's again where I'm resisting or fighting, or I'm not at peace and not at ease because I'm just I'm trying to make things maybe the way I want them to be. So I've heard it done that way.
Are you drawing a distinction between self-inflicted and out?
Well, if to use Rohr, the unnecessary suffering that Rohr is talking about is somewhat self-inflicted. I mean, at least I have a role in it, right? Because I am wanting to do what I cannot do. I'm trying to change what I cannot change. Well, we all know the serenity prayer, right? You know, help me to know, you know, to change the things I can, you know, to accept the things I can't, and give me the wisdom to know the difference. If you're trying to change the things you can't, you will suffer agony trying to change what you cannot, right? So but it's not totally self-inflicted, because the situation I maybe didn't create, but because I'm fighting the situation and wish I could make it different, I'm at you know, some sort of discontent. But it's not that I created the situation. You know, you see what I'm saying? I'm not saying it's totally our doing, but there is a part of it that pain just happens to us. If you're talking about it that way, necessary suffering, it just happens. The unnecessary suffering, I do have some role, some choice in that. Like, will I just accept it and say it is what it is? I mean, I can't do anything about it. I wish I could. I wish God would. Well, now you get a little upset with God. Why don't you change it, God, since you can?
You know, I could see that we would have suffering from all our little schemes to avoid the suffering.
Yeah, to not accept that life is difficult. The first principle of Buddhism is life is difficult. You won't understand anything that the Buddhists are talking about if you don't start where they start. They start with the basic truth. Life is difficult. Now let's talk about what you do. And Buddhism is a way of trying to deal with the difficulties of life. And there's a lot of wisdom in it. I mean, there's a lot of truth in it. They're talking about a lot of true things. They talk about meditation, centering prayer from a Christian perspective. They are onto the truth of that. Life is difficult. You can't change it. You'd better learn how to navigate through it, right? So, yeah, all of our schemes can just pile up more frustration because they won't work out either.
They're always misguided.
Yeah, and when they fail, I'm more frustrated. There's some things I just have to accept, and I have to accept it because I'm finite. I'm a human being. It's a fallen world. There's sin and death, right? And the sooner I accept that, the more I'm able to say, but living in the kingdom of God is living above the level of, life is not determined at the level of sin and death. It can be experienced above that, though I have to accept the fact my own sinfulness is still here, and the sinfulness of others, and the brokenness of life, and hang on to the promise of the last enemy to be defeated will be death. That's the one. When that's gone, you know. Okay, last thought.
Well,
Time's up.
I think, so I wanted to just make explicit something. Having been depressed before myself, there's a filter in hearing things that kind of corrupts things, isn't it? Sure. So I thought Winna and Alan touched on mental health issues and how the analogies and relationship between our free will and I think Jim actually asked a question that got at what everyone meant in a better way than I would have, so I'm glad he asked it. But I still think it may be worth saying just explicitly that it isn't true. One of the baggages we have, I think, in traditional readings of the church that you still hear is that depression is a symptom of something you chose that you did wrong in your relationship with God. And that absolutely can happen. And so there are ways that I can mess up my life that lead to mental health problems. It's true. And there is a role and choice in getting out of them too that can, but also absolutely independently occurs to a lot of people. Even I think things that we think of as choices like addiction and substance abuse are
Right.
I don't think that's usually a helpful way to even think about those conditions. Most of them are things that happen to a person that they then have to deal with and make choices to get liberated from, and that does involve God freeing us. So I think it's a really useful analogy, but also didn't want anyone in the audience to hear a message we didn't mean.
No,
That depression is actually your fault.
We
For example,
Jeanette.
Yeah, no,
Technically, I got exposures that led to cancer. But genetically, and the three of us that were talking, my body responded to the treatments. So, okay, that's great. We don't tend to look at that depression can be a genetic, it can be a
Yeah, it's 'cause
physical.
it's hard to point to what it was because it's so complicated.
We just don't
No.
accept it.
Yeah,
We accept health issues that
Right.
way, but we don't think about mind issues that way.
Right, and I appreciate you making that distinction because, and sometimes I may not hear someone's question well, in which case, please say, well, Greg, you missed the point I was asking. It's entirely possible, right? It's in the realm of possibility. But no, I really appreciate that distinction because, I don't want to be, we don't want to be heard as everything is, if you're having any hardship, you have chosen it. So the necessary suffering might be someone struggles with issues of mental health. And it's no different than someone who struggles with diabetes or high blood pressure or any other physical condition. It's not of their choosing. They have to learn, how do I cope with this? Yeah, we don't want to say, all issues of mental health are bad personal choices. That's not what we're saying. And
You're
hopefully,
just not praying enough.
yeah, because we've all been on the guilt trip of being told, well, if you'll just buck up and do better, you won't have that problem.
Have
And
faith.
that's devastating, right? To people who are dealing with something that in the Serenity Prayer is beyond their control. The things I cannot change. I cannot change certain things. I have to accept them. And maybe it's something I have to live with, right? I appreciate that clarification. That's an important one. Thank you. We're going to have a fellowship meal. If you can stay, we'd love for you to do that. If not, but we're dismissed. Go in peace.